Men have feared Hades, the god of the underworld, for as long as we can remember. But what if we told you that Hades wasn't actually a villain? Sure, he might have a bad reputation, but that doesn't necessarily make him a bad guy. Before making any more assumptions, let's delve into his backstory and find out the truth. Watch until the end to find out why the Greek god's backstory is the most messed up of all.
And you are wearing his merchandise!
We know Hades as the god of the underworld, but the ancient Greeks referred to him as Pluton, the wealth giver. Romans also knew a thing or two about Hades, but they chose to call him Pluto. Today, many of us refer to Hades as hell. After all, that is where he spends most of his time. But contrary to popular belief, Hades is far from being the devilish creature we paint him out to be. Hades had two brothers, Poseidon and Zeus, and they were made to divvy up the world. Unfortunately for Hades, he was given the underworld, whereas Zeus received the heavens and Poseidon the ocean. Unlike his brothers who grew up to be praised and loved, Hades was given the short end of the stick. But whether or not he minded is up for debate. As the world's underkeeper, Hades became a dreaded commodity. He was so greatly feared that many refrained from speaking his name or depicting him in art. The underworld was no place for a god. Still, someone had to balance the world of the living and the dead, as this ensured peace and order on Earth. Greeks much preferred to give thanks and praise to Poseidon and Zeus. In fact, many of them referred to Hades as the other Zeus, which is probably why the god wasn't too fond of his brother. Despite having a deadly reputation, Hades could be reasoned with. Still, Hades has a valid reason for hating Zeus, but we'll disclose why a little later. Spending eternity in the underworld can get a little boring and extremely lonely, to say the least. So when Hades fell in love with Persephone, he decided to take her as his wife. Problem was, Hades resorted to kidnapping her instead of courting her. Still, some might say that he had little choice in the matter, considering no one ever wanted to journey to the underworld. Unfortunately, Hades' job was so demanding that the god only traveled above ground on 1 or 2 occasions, one of them being Persephone's abduction. One day, when Persephone and her maidens were picking flowers, Hades caused a beautiful flower to bloom before her eyes. Persephone was instantly attracted to it. She plucked it from the ground, and seconds later, it opened up beneath her and she fell through. She was soon greeted by Hades, who was waiting for her in a 4-horse golden chariot. Hades now had a 3-headed dog and a beautiful wife, and all of a sudden, the underworld didn't seem too bad of a place. Regrettably, Hades' happiness wasn't bound to last forever, because, well, Persephone's mother, Demeter, mourned her disappearance. When Demeter found out what had happened to her daughter, she begged the gods to retrieve her, but her wish was not granted. The Greek gods begged Demeter to come home, but were unable to persuade her. So to save humankind, Zeus sent Hermes to the underworld to compromise with its ruler. Despite being branded as the bad guy, Hades complied to Demeter's demands, but not before making his wife eat a single pomegranate seed. This seed would ensure that Persephone remained tied to the underworld. This way, she would be obliged to return home for 1/3 of the year. Still, whether or not Persephone truly loved her husband is unknown. There are many who believe that Hades and Persephone raised a family together, but when you dig a little deeper, you find out that these gods did indeed have children, just not together. Hades is said to have a daughter named Macaria. However, no one knows who Macaria's mother is, and Persephone is said to have a son named Zagreus, with Hades' very own brother Zeus. So, there you have it, guys, the real reason Zeus and Hades don't get along.
If only. If only.
Stay tuned to find out why Descendants fans think that Mal and Macaria are one and the same. It's easy to see Hades as the bad guy. After all, he collects souls, kidnaps his love interests, and spends most of his time underground. Still, there's a method to his madness. All in all, Hades doesn't take pleasure in his work. It's not the job he chose for himself, but rather the one he was given. And balancing the world of the living and the dead needs to be done. Hades has spent his entire life living in his brother's shadow, so it's no big surprise that he dislikes them as much as they dislike him. On top of that, the only woman Hades ever truly loved agreed to spend 2/3 of the year away from him, only to later become pregnant with his brother's child. Although it's stated that Hades seldom left the underworld, it's possible that this is far from the truth. After all, Hades created an invisibility helmet which allowed him to travel without being seen. The Hades we know and love is often portrayed as a miserable character, and well, this wouldn't be too far from the truth, since spending centuries in the dark underworld did do something to his mind. Over time, Hades began to enjoy evoking fear, which is what led him to develop a sarcastic and morbid personality. Being the god of the underworld can give you a bad reputation, but truth be told, Hades was not the one responsible for sending mortals to hell. Instead, he was the one tasked with welcoming them. It was Thanatos, the god of death, who would judge and charge mortals who had committed unforgivable crimes. Still, Hades was so scary that he became known as the devil when in truth, he was an extremely just god who oftentimes showed mercy. All in all, it's safe to say that Hades is simply misunderstood. He's just a ruler who has a bad reputation due to his terrifying outlook.
Let me loose upon them. They will pray again.
Now that we know how the Greeks depicted Hades, let's take a look at how Hades was portrayed in the classic Disney film, Hercules. Since many of us watched Disney movies before ever learning about Greek mythology, it's safe to say that we first met Hades in 1997 when Disney released Hercules. As a result, we were initially led to believe that Hades, aka the god of the underworld, was one of the evilest beings in the entire world. Fortunately, this isn't exactly true, but let's entertain the notion. In Disney's Hercules, Hades wants nothing more than to usurp his brother Zeus's throne and take over Mount Olympus. He truly believes he's earned this platform, seeing as he spent centuries underground. Disney chose to give Hades a tantalizing attitude. The god was clearly intelligent and conniving, but he was also hilarious and merciful, choosing to strike deals with people instead of condemning them. In Greek mythology, Hades enjoys being the god of the underworld, and he accepts his role without complaint. But in Hercules, it's Zeus who gives Hades the underworld, despite him wanting nothing to do with it.
You, by the way, so charitably bestowed on me, Zeus.
Since Hades has a fun and sarcastic personality, it's easy to see why living in the underworld just isn't his style. Disney's Hades hates his job and everything that comes along with it. He wants to be soaking up the sun on Mount Olympus, but is forbidden to do so. So this is precisely why Hades wants to take his brother Zeus out of the picture and rule instead. Problem is, Zeus is stronger than Hades will ever be, so fighting him on his own is simply out of the question. With this in mind, Zeus tends to team up with unlikely forces to challenge his brother's title. Whereas Hades, the unseen, enjoys having his three-headed dog, Cerberus, by his side, this isn't the case for the Disney villain version. Instead, Hades is often seen with his shape-shifting lackeys, Pain and Panic. Despite being known for his intelligence, Hades often puts his trust in Pain and Panic, which has proven to be a horrible idea in the past. In Hercules, Hades consults the fates to find out if he'll be victorious in conquering Mount Olympus. They confirm that he will, in 18 years' time, when the planets align.
Yes, Hades rules!
On this fateful day, Hades will be able to unleash the Titans, which Zeus previously imprisoned, and take over his brother's throne. The fates go on to say that his plans will be foiled if Hercules, son of Zeus, intervenes. So this causes Hades to send Pain and Panic to poison his nephew with a very special potion. The potion will turn Hercules into a normal baby human, thus allowing Hades to get rid of him once and for all. Fortunately, Pain and Panic do not succeed in giving Hercules every last drop of the potion, and he grows up to be extremely strong and mighty. So despite Hades' best efforts, the prophecy takes place and Hades misses his window. Although Hades might be the main antagonist of the movie, he's managed to remain as one of the most favored Disney villains of all time. All in all, Disney's Hades is relatable and hilarious. This misunderstood Greek god has been driven to madness, and many would argue that he isn't as bad as he seems. As many of you know, Disney Channel is currently working on releasing Descendants 3, which will showcase Hades in a very offbeat way. Millennials are so used to seeing Hades in a negative light that it's hard for them to imagine him being a good guy. But from the looks of it, Hades might end up helping Auradon. Be that as it may, it's very possible that Hades is merely helping Auradon to save his own skin. But we'll judge him once the truth gets out. When King Beast and Queen Belle became the rulers of Auradon, they chose to bring the villains back to life and imprison them on the Isle of the Lost. Hades is one of these villains, so it's safe to say that he's no longer ruling over the underworld or scheming to take over Mount Olympus. Oddly enough, however, Hades has never been seen before, so it's possible that the villain was so evil that he had to be locked up in a jail cell on the Isle. This is clearly demonstrated in the trailer when we see Celia opening up an iron door to release the blue-haired god. Many Descendants fans believe Hades to be Mao's father. After all, she did refer to a blue orb as Dad in Under the Sea, a Descendants story. And since Hades is one of the newest additions to the Descendants franchise, fans are convinced that there's more more to his story than meets the eye.
Remember who you serve!
I serve myself. I have, since you cheated me.
Oddly enough, Hades did have a daughter named Macaria, and while we believe her mother to be Persephone, some sources state that no one knows who her mother truly is. She's described as having black hair and violet eyes, and she's often pictured wearing dark purples and greens. We don't know about you, but this sounds like a lot like Mal to us. Still, there's a reason why Maleficent doesn't want her daughter knowing who her father is, because, well, if Hades truly is her dad, this would make Mal a demigod, and since Maleficent didn't want her daughter knowing she was stronger than her, this may be why she chose to leave her in the dark. Disney's Hercules portrays Hades as a gray-skinned villain who has yellow eyes, a long face, and flaming blue hair. He's short-tempered, witty, and bitter, but he's an honest god who always holds up his end of the bargain. He's often seen wearing black robes that are tied together with a silver skull pin. Going from a cartoon to a real-life human can be quite the jump, which is why it's only normal that actor Cheyenne Jackson looks nothing like Disney's first adaptation of the villain. The Disney Channel has managed to stay true to Hades' essence, choosing to stick with the blue hair, wicked smile, and black clothing. Still, Hades looks a lot more fashionable than ever before. Do you think Hades will prove himself useful and help the VKs save Auradon? Or is Hades truly as rotten as they say he is? The villain might actually prove himself to be genuine and kind. However, if they choose to base Hades off of his Disney movie counterpart, Auradon might be dealing with their biggest threat yet. So is Hades a misunderstood Greek god or a wicked and calculating villain? Let us know what your verdict is in the comment section below. Give this video a big thumbs up if you think Hades' backstory is seriously messed up. And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe to The Things for the latest Disney news. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.